Describing bilingualism functions. Another dimension in which bilingualism can be described is by taking into account the functions that different languages are put to. So, what we are saying is that although we talk about the use of language, that is the function of language, that will still be connected to the degree of bilingualism that a person might know. So, by functions, we mean the use of the different languages in external context, that is, external functions, and internal context, or the private space, which we are calling over here the internal functions. Now, the external functions of a language are determined by areas of contact. So, when do individuals come into contact with other languages, and what has been the media or the medium of acquisition of that language, and where do they use that language? Now, think of these things in terms of your own context. Think, for instance, your bilinguality in terms of knowing English, Urdu, and a regional language. And then think, when did you learn one? Where do you have to use one rather than the other? What was the medium of acquisition? Did you learn it at school, or did you learn it within community? And this will also lead you to think that when and where and with whom do you use a specific language. So there is variation of each language function depends on, number one, duration. So what is the duration of your contact with a given language? Because this is directly related to your state of bilingualism. For instance, if you become an immigrant or you have moved from your rural context into a city area where the dominant language or the national language is being spoken, then of course the degree to which you know Urdu in Pakistani context will be much more than the degree to which someone else will know Urdu if that person has come to this urban context in only say about 6 months ago. What is the frequency? What is the number of times? What are the number of times that you have to sort of use a language, or you come into contact with other bilinguals who are using that language will also affect your the degree of bilinguality that you have. For instance, if you're working in an office that you are using a specific language, and you have been working there for every day for say about 10 or 15 years, then of course your proficiency in a specific language will somehow rise. Having said that, it is not just the duration and frequency, it also depends on the pressures that there are on you to learn the language or another language. That pressure might be an economic pressure. That means you feel compelled to learn, for instance, English to get a job, for a promotion, or for working in a specific space. You are pressured to learn French if you plan to work in a certain country. So that pressure will also affect your degree of bilinguality that you have. When we come to these internal functions, we think about contact with languages at home, in the private spaces. You have domestics coming in, domestic help coming in. You need to deal with them. If they don't understand your language, you learn their language a little bit to communicate with them. Then there are tutors coming in. Then you have your grandparents who might speak a regional language. You have your parents who might speak another language. And what if your father and mother have different home languages? It all depends nevertheless, on the encouragement or discouragement of the use of language that will affect the degree of language that you know. So language, again over here, your language proficiency might be passive or active. That is, you might be able to understand a language but not speak it so well, as it happens with several Punjabi speakers in urban contexts, as the parents discourage them to speak in Punjabi. In any case, the contact will also depend on the neighborhood you're living in, what are the languages they are speaking, and at times you also learn different languages to affiliate with certain ethnic groups, and sometimes also to affiliate with the religious groups. So you might be attracted to learn, for instance, your Arabic for religious purposes, and then their occupational group. If your occupation is in a certain context and you need to work in a certain context, you might be forced to learn a language, or at least encouraged to learn another language. Similarly, recreation groups of friends that you go out with, the languages they are speaking become very important. And then, not to forget, the contact languages in school will also have an impact on the degree of bilingualism you have. And coming to the language or the medium of instruction in the language, it will be under some sort of policy. Either it is determined by your nationality or territoriality. For instance, in certain parts of Switzerland, certain parts of Canada, you might have access to schools with different languages, depending on the territory you're living in. Your religious affiliation will also determine the language of the school. And of course, the ethnic region. So all these things have an impact on the functions that you will put to the language, the functions which are used in that language, and this will affect the degree of your language or bilinguality.